My topic is on survivors of human trafficking. So the media can be a really great outlet, and it can also be a really bad outlet, as we've learned with numerous things with the pandemic and everything else going on. So some great things that the media does for survivors of human trafficking is they share these stories, and they can help advocate and show moving and just memorable tales from these survivors. They can conduct really important interviews that can be really educational. They can use visual images to create really powerful and moving messages. Some things they get wrong, though, they can over dramatize, or they can exploit survivors and can downplay what they went through. Their interviews can lack empathy, they can be forceful and create some really unsafe places for a lot of these survivors. And the images that they present really should protect the survivors' identities just for their own safety, and they should portray them as humans, not victims, and use them just as stock photos for other things. So those are kind of some of the things that the media is doing that is helpful and then not so helpful. Family support can be huge. Obviously, in some foreign countries, when a lot of these children are taken at young ages, a lot of them are not reunited with their families, or they were so young they don't even know who their families are. So it's just kind of trying to create a family support. If they have one, it can be great. It can help with minimizing, their self-distancing, destructive behaviors, the risk of mental health problems and issues. It can help with adapting and coping and creating bonds again with people and trusting people. And then therapy, which is huge, can be done on an individual and a family basis. So that's really important. The role of peers is huge in human trafficking. Just having that social support system is so important. The biggest issue is just trying to remain non-judgmental and just being that active listener. You want to help that survivor just to build trust, to have a safe place with somebody, and to understand they're not to blame. And as somebody who's trying to help and be a peer, it's important to remain non-judgmental and understand that there could be a really weird bond between the survivor and the person who trafficked them. Even though it doesn't make sense, it's there. And so we just need to remember to remain non-judgmental. It's also important to have somebody that's linguistically and culturally appropriate. This can just really help with trusting, especially when they feel like they don't have anyone in their corner. And just being a good resource, being somebody there and helping with therapy and providing additional outside supports and resources is huge as a peer. So interesting enough, there is a cycle that when it comes to human trafficking. A lot are done through family, and it's the hardest thing to detect. Many use it as a business to make money. They sell their children. It can create more than one trafficker. It could be an uncle, a grandfather, a brother, a parent. And it becomes normal for the children that they don't really know what they're doing is wrong because that's just how they live their life. So to them, it's just an everyday occurrence, which then creates this idea where it gets passed through generation to generation, and then sometimes it can go all the way to extended family. So different legal and political issues. Human trafficking is illegal in a lot of countries, not all of them. The most prevalent cities in the United States for human trafficking is Washington, D.C., Nevada, and Florida. It's least common in New Hampshire, Idaho, and Massachusetts. So different ways that we can help legally to combat human trafficking is learn the indicators of human trafficking. Look for those signs and symptoms in somebody that you think might be, a prostitute or a sex slave or stuck in this horrible way of life, and always report any suspicions. There's nothing wrong with reporting it. Even if it's not true, at least you reported it. You're trying to keep others safe. Volunteer with anti-trafficking efforts in your community. A huge one here in Utah County is Operation Underground Railroad. Write local government officials and voice your concerns about human trafficking, and be well informed and stay informed with human trafficking is huge to help with political system with human trafficking. Potential barriers. The biggest one for survivors of human trafficking is mental health. They have a high risk for depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicide. They're trying to overcome this verbal, physical, mental this abuse that they've gone through, and overcoming the fear of trusting others. A lot of them don't trust certain genders or age, or they have a lot of problems with those in superior positions because they're so used to being abused and just sold that somebody who is above them it's scary for them to trust them. And survivors usually have a lot more unmet social needs and a lot of less support, especially initially when coming out, because they themselves don't know what to do anymore. The international scope. So as I said before, human trafficking happens everywhere, whether it's legal or not. The U.S. News reports the 5 worst countries for human trafficking are Russia, China, Iran, Belarus, and Venezuela. So socioeconomic status. A lot of the survivors lack the funds and resources. They're usually low-income families. They live in poverty. Many turn to human trafficking as a means to support and provide for their family. It's reported that some families will actually sell some of their children in order to survive, or a lot of mothers will turn to prostitution. Or vice versa. A lot of them sell their children to those with more money, thinking that the children will get an education, food, and water, but that's not the case. A great example of this is the movie Les Mis. Anne Hathaway's character that she plays, she gives her daughter to this family thinking that they're going to take care of her, and, they're lying to her saying she needs a doctor, this or that. She just keeps sending them more money, and they're just not doing anything, and then she ends up turning kind of crazy. She sells her teeth, her hair, and she ends up being a prostitute in order to try and help save and support her child. So that's another reason why human trafficking gets started. It's just a way to support, and it's a means to an end, essentially. I could not really find any connection regarding race and human trafficking. There's really not a correlation. Race is not an important thing. Same thing with religion. There really was no evidence that I could find that suggested there was a connection between religion and human trafficking. However, there was a huge connection related to gender. Women and children are trafficked more than men. However, men are trafficked as well. Human trafficking is considered to be the biggest, gender issue because it's all based upon the sex of a person, depending on what it's for, whether it's labor, whether it's sexual, for why they're being trafficked. Interestingly enough, women are trafficked more than men, but women traffic more women than men traffic women. So essentially, women are known as like bouncers in other countries. They're the ones that are coercing all these females into getting trafficked. And then the men are the one who are, buying them for whatever they're being trafficked for, but it's the women who are getting other women. A great example of this is the documentary on Jeffrey Epstein on Netflix. He himself, if I remember correctly, never was like sitting on a street corner coercing, women into his house. It was other women that he had initially coerced that then got more women to come, and then those women got more women. And so it's really actually a bigger issue with women getting other women, because females most likely to trust another female over a male initially, and so that's where we get this issue. Geographical location. Many women, children, and men are trafficked in foreign countries with limited access to medical care and mental health care. So the idea of telehealth could help bridge that gap to provide more resources for people, to help educate people, and just to keep people more safe. So this idea of telehealth could be huge and extremely beneficial to decreasing the rate of human trafficking, but also increasing the mental health of survivors of human trafficking. So some different biases. The implicit bias that I feel like is really strong is that many in the United States don't believe that trafficking happens here, and because of this, they don't get involved. They don't educate themselves. They just say, it's not our problem. However, the U.S. is one of the top consumers of human trafficking, of child pornography, and this is a huge issue. So we may not be the ones, kidnapping or coercing people and then selling them, but we are the buyers. We are the people that are consuming it. So we are a major issue. If we could decrease the amount of people who are consuming it, it's decreasing the amount of people that are being taken advantage and sold into this horrible business. An explicit bias is that These are formed when something affects us personally. And as relating to the implicit bias, a lot of us don't know people who were human trafficked, and so we don't take it seriously. So what we need to do in order to change these biases is we need to take it personally. So that way we can stop prevent the high rates of human slavery, of modern day slavery that are just out of this world. So on the international scope, it's estimated that anywhere from 45,000 to 50,000 women and children are trafficked in the United States alone, and that's yearly. Human trafficking, though, is happening globally, and it's an increasing economic hardships. It is a massive issue, and as stated before, it doesn't matter whether it's legal or illegal. In the United States it's illegal, but yet on the dark web and stuff, people are just consuming child pornography and everything else. Something to consider as well is usually trafficking starts from a poorer country and then is migrated to a wealthier country. So, the buyers or the consumers are people who are in the United States or in these bigger, more elaborate companies, and the people who are being trafficked are in these poor countries that they don't have any other means, and they're just getting sold into this. But as I said, the consumers are us. They're half, if not more, of the issue and the problem. And it's likely that trafficking increases after social conflict. When there's a social conflict in a country, a lot of people use that as a coping mechanism or as a way to, disregard the government, and so the numbers spike even higher. And that's it.